And in this talk, I want to focus on networks, and that's an important idea that I like to teach my students about is not just looking for networks and the patterns, but also looking for the patterns in the networks that we observe about gangs that show something different, something we would not expect otherwise. Because networks are so fundamental to what we do, who we are as human beings, that a lot of what gang members do and people who commit crimes do is very much the same thing in terms of patterns, in terms of networks. They behave in the same way that we do. And so our job is not just to uncover networks and map them, but to try to ask ourselves, is the fact that they're gang members, does it make these networks anything special, anything different than what they would do if we would be describing, friendships and activities that are legal? If you're thinking about a disruption perspective, it also gives you an idea, just by mapping it like this, of the kind of impact that it will have to just remove this guy from the picture. So, of course, a lot of police investigations will try to think through priority targets. But by having the map, having the network, in order to have those discussions, you can also make predictions. What will happen if we remove this guy? Who's going to be there to replace that gang or that person? So why networks? Well, as I said earlier, it's a fundamental human need. It's one of our abilities. It's what differentiates us from many, of course, in the animal kingdom, is the fact that it's so important to us. We have this instinct, this reflex to connect to others, to cooperate. We don't just want to do everything alone. And I guess if COVID also taught us, this in the last few months is how even people who didn't feel it was important to them, at one point they started to feel it if they didn't have these connections, especially during COVID. So, of course, we have different, inclinations towards social behavior, but for all of them, for all of us, it's important. So if it's so important to our crime theories, if it's so important to us, of course, it's hard to understand why we wouldn't pay more attention to this in our measures, in the way that we approach surveys, in what we ask of people who commit crimes, people who are being released from prison, who are in the community, and why don't we systematically ask them about their networks and try to use networks as a central strategy, for example, for rehabilitation or gang exit. So it's fundamental, and what's been I guess what's been shown in the course of many years of research on this is it's often more important than the socio-demographic profiles and the individual qualities that people have. And it's one of the, one example is for gang membership, for example. A lot of the gang members that become gang members come from neighborhoods in which the majority of people don't become gang members. And they have the same profile, the same socio-demographics. If you consider two 15-year-olds, Caucasian, male, from the same school, same neighborhood, this information itself won't help you determine, who's going to become gang member between the two. They have the same profile. What if you have a single piece of additional information? What if we know how close each person is socially to current gang members? And right away we see, how crucial that piece of information is. It depends on your influences. It depends on what you're exposed to. If you want to go back to differential association theory, it's not just, how many people who commit crimes or not, but how close you are, how influential they are to you. So we have 100 people here that could be seen from police files, and 50% of them were law-abiding citizens. So there was no crimes committed with them. They were in the car together. They were pulled over, speeding ticket, girlfriend, boyfriend, family members. Their lives were all intertwined, and this spoke to us to the danger, that could also it could also happen from doing network analysis, is to widen the net for no reason. So we have to know the context of these interactions. These people are not necessarily involved in criminal activities. And so that was one of the lessons here. So we need to have another layer for understanding the context of interactions. And what we did in that study is we measured something that we called network capital. So what do people bring to the network in terms of skill set, criminal skill set? And by measuring this, all of the law-abiding citizens in the network had low scores, and they were pushed out of the network. They were not considered as part of the next intervention, if you will. And the first lesson, it's the first challenge that many of us have, is to try to define those gangs, those boundaries. Okay, so where does the gang start and where does it stop? And you would think that even asking gang members would bring clarity to this question, but it doesn't. Sometimes they don't refer to themselves as gang members. It's my buddy. It's my homie. Like it's not necessarily something that they think about, that we have 20 members and this is the membership process. This is our structure. Sometimes there's none of that. And from the point of view of law enforcement, they look like gangs, So if we're going to plan an intervention and we're going to try to define who's going to get arrested, who's going to be part of our investigation, who gets to have a wire, and we listen to whose conversation in this network, who's under surveillance here. It's complicated. And if you don't have a network, it's even more challenging. The experts, the investigators, the police, they know their guys. If you do a case file review, a brainstorming, the crime analyst, they know their guys. The thing that network analysis can provide here is just that big picture to view to complete that story. You'll miss people. The human brain cannot remember, of course, everything that happened over the last 5 years. So by systematically coding what's going on, you get to not miss anyone, and you get to understand the importance of people in a different way. The person that you think is the leader of this group may not be the person that's most important or interesting, or the person that drives the network itself. And in any project that I did on networks, I had surprises like this. So the sort of Mr. Big theory that can be debunked, of course, with network analysis in that way. So if you map the network of people who are victim of gang violence, and then you can calculate the social distance. So how many handshakes away are you, everyone else in the network, from these victims? And that becomes a strong, strong predictor of who's going to get shot next. This sort of network analysis, this sort of analysis is helpful to help prevent further violence from a victim perspective, but not necessarily to find the shooters. Maybe they're part of this network, maybe they're not, but we don't have any tangible way of finding that out. But for victims, we can. Violence spreads through networks, just like many human behaviors spread through networks. Many illnesses like COVID-19 spread through networks, and it's the same for violence. People shoot people that they know, people around them. So if we want to prevent victimization and further victimization, then we can use networks for that purpose as well.